I want to thank Leo and the AFT for inviting me, and thank you for your very kind words. We don't hear them right now in the region from anyone right now. They're kind of more like this. I wanted to just make two quick comments, and then I think there are like two sets of remarks that I hope will kick off and tee off a discussion. First, HRIC and CLB, we and I owe a great deal to Dongfang's generosity. I think many of my staff and for the last 25 years, I think we feel very much like we're mentored by, Big Brother, but a good Big Brother, not like Big Brother, like a good Big Brother. Big Brother Han, who's been very generous to us. And actually, we are still, Leo, taken in by CLB after we moved out of our last office, and Dongfang took us in. We felt like homeless people that showed up at his door with our bags and said, "Can we stay with you again?" So he said, "Come on in," so we did. So we're there with CLB, and it's great for our staff to have the incredible richness and humor and camaraderie and solidarity of the CLB staff, who are terrific. The other thing is, we do think of our office in China. So we feel that Dongfang is not allowed onto the mainland, but we are in, and our office in China happens to be in Hong Kong. And Dongfang and I always joke, who's going to get to actually cross that bridge over at Luowu? Is it going to be him or us first? And because of something I'll say later, it's the sensitivity of human rights versus labor rights. And he always says, "I'll cross first, and then maybe you'll follow in a few years." So depending on, when the door really opens, for us to go home, but not right now. So Han, as usual, his opening comments is he looks forward, and he's not into looking back. Hence why he normally declines our invitation to speak at any June 4th activity. He says, "No, Sharon, I don't want to go back and talk about that." And I say, "But Dongfang, we're not talking about back in memory. We're talking about, that we need to have accountability for past impunity, or we can't go forward." But I think Han tends to look back briefly for the purpose of going forward. And it's always gratitude and recognition of the path that went before, even though he's gone through a lot. And I think that's really important. I want to say as a comment that why I think Han and his leadership of CLB and this vision is powerful, because it's fueled by a very deep humility and humanity and a faith in people, which even extends to the Communist Party, which I think I will take some issue with at the end. So let me say, I want to highlight like four, as I hear it, aspects of the strategic vision that I think Han has put out through these very concrete examples. And I think it's a very particular strategic vision. It's not an accident. I think Han really thinks about it consciously. First, the vision and his approach and the work that he's laying out is very practical. It is very practical, and it's based on an assessment of realities in the short and long term, and what's possible at whatever point. We have this big argument in the human rights community. They say, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't. There's a lot of no's in the human rights community. And I like that important part of the vision, because if you wait for perfect conditions, we're never going to do anything, ever. It's kind of like when Gandalf said to Bilbo, he said, "We don't choose our time, but the time you have to do the most you can in it." So he's kind of like really a Lord of the Rings guy. So the first aspect is this whole vision and that he's laying out of this approach is practical, and second, it's win-win. In other words, if the government, the workers, the union, anyone leaves the table feeling like that wasn't good, is it really going to be the basis for a sustainable, permanent, real solution? Probably not. So I think that's the second aspect. It's aiming for a win-win, but at the same time, having space for criticism. So, it's win-win, but hey, that was bad. So I think there's room for that. That's the second aspect. The third aspect is by changing this view, which I totally agree with, is in the international community of not only Chinese workers, but of Chinese people that were victims of human rights abuses, victims of, just victims. I think it's really important to take that on, but that's the basis for the third aspect of his strategy, which is You center the empowerment of the workers. It's empowerment as the core, and respecting and treating workers, as agents making their own choices. The fourth and final aspect is it's a very iterative, boots on the ground, evolving within a particular historical context, zooming in and zooming out. So it is not a static, program of how workers' rights will be advanced in China. And it's not a static, like, this is what you can do to help us. It's, let's all get a little strategic and realize the situation on the ground is moving underneath us. So we need to be aware of where we can jump and where we can push and where the space is. So I think that fourth aspect is very important, and it was totally demonstrated, by looking at the trajectory of some key strikes and how in each strikes a little space opened. It's not going to be an overnight Jasmine revolution, but there was little spaces. And how do you exploit those little spaces? The second cluster of sort of observations I want to share has to do with human rights and labor rights. And this is a very long conversation we have had. And in the lead up to the Olympics in 2008, I don't know if you remember this, 2006, we convened a joint first-time meeting of labor rights and union activists with human rights activists from China, from Hong Kong, from Europe. So we had the international unions, we had the China, we brought them all together, and we fully, well, we didn't fully until after, but we thought it was going to be a difficult conversation because there were very different senses of mandates, approaches, representation, accountability, mutual preconceptions, perceptions, and that is in fact what happened. We brought everyone together, and I think there was about 60 people, and it was invite only, and then the word got out that a bunch of human rights activists and labor people were meeting for a week or something, and then all of these academic friends of ours called pleading for an invitation. And I have to say, I hope I'm not offending anyone, but we said, well, a few of you might be welcome, but this is a strategic, practical meeting. What we really want to do is to talk to each other to figure out, are there things we can do together? And what are the differences? So it was action-oriented. And from that, I think that was a big opening for me to see that there were really very different sort of approaches. And but having said that, since then and before then, here are the aspects, because I think this is very important to put labor rights within the context of human rights, because economic, cultural, and social rights, housing, livelihood, safe workplaces, health care, basic social safety network, all of these, right to water, right to air, these are all basic, fundamental human rights as well. So I want to put it in that context, and what is happening in China, let's say from 1989, since we're at the 25th anniversary of June 4th, is that there was, in 1989, the authorities and the international community, and still very much today, when you say the words human rights, the next word that comes up is dissidents, democracy activists. And in fact, that's not really accurate anymore. That what is happening in China is that the activism and the citizen actions are around food safety, air, polluted water, collapsing villages because of the water, AIDS villages, health. These are the full range of issues that not just a few people are demanding rights for. We're talking about whole villages. 20,000 people will come out in a village. We're talking about 100,000 people coming out. You're talking about 10 million online. We're talking about sex trafficking. We're talking about, for example, one activist that we work with, this was after a school principal forced his young junior high school age students to have sex with him. She went online naked, and she put on herself, hey, principal, leave those young girls alone, try me, It caused a whole meme on the internet that caused hundreds of people just started picking it up. Ai Weiwei did it, and they thought he invented it, but he didn't. It was this activist, Ye Haiyan. And then young guys picked it up, and they had baseball bats, and their meme was, they showed up in videos, and they said, hey, principal, come check me out. But they're, batting bats. This is the way in which I would say human rights, social justice activists, are working. So this brings some of the similarities and some of the differences, I think, is important. The role of fear. The role of fear is absolutely has reached a plateau. And we hear this a lot from the activists that we are training and working with, and they're saying fear doesn't work anymore. You can still be afraid, but the reason it doesn't work anymore is it doesn't stop you from doing things you do. So like the Tiananmen mothers, who we work very closely with since, for the last 20 years, they shot powerful, amazing videos. They went like 22-hour train rides to interview some of the other families who had lost children. And they interviewed them, and they gave us the footage, but at very high risk cost to smuggle that footage out to us. This was just, and when it finally got to us, and they were quite strategic about, sending out multiple camels, and one of them got to us, the public security paid them a visit and said, we know you sent this to HRIC, and you better not give them anything. They'd already given us everything. And they knew that we knew the public security came. And this is similar to workers. When you work with workers, it's the workers who should be empowered. For human rights activists, we believe the ultimate decision on any action are the people. So if the Tiananmen mothers told us, fold up the whole project, don't do this, that's what we would have done. But the word came to us quite clearly and directly. You're going to hear that we were approached. You put it all out, and you put it out now, because we owe this with our last breath to our children. And we did. Now, you ought to know that I also put it on my LinkedIn page, and now my LinkedIn page, I received a notice from customer service that I am now blocked in China. So you can follow that, because I'm dealing with the legal department of LinkedIn right now about that. And they said there was content deemed illegal in China on my page. So I wanted to know, what content would that be? I said, could you make that explicit? Could you tell me the legal basis? Can you tell me how you determine this? Can you tell me how I appeal it? And that's hence why I'm talking to legal. So the role of fear is different. The second thing is humor. I think in the activist community right now is very important. You can see it online, you can see it. We did a training, and this watcher was watching us, and he clearly was a mainland security type watcher, because I heard him speaking Putonghua. And he's videotaping us in the lobby of where we were training, and he just kept videotaping us, and then I couldn't take it anymore. So I took my cell phone, and I went over, and I videotaped him. So I stood in front, and I'm videotaping him, and he's videotaping me, and he went, oh, God, this is ridiculous. So he got up, and for some reason, when he got up, he was so flustered, for some reason, he left the other cell phone on the sofa. So I went and took the cell phone, and I ran after him, kind of, and I said, I wanted to do the principal thing, and I said, 对不起，是你的手机吧? Did you leave your cell phone? And he goes, and he grabs it, and then he was like, oh. And then he looks at me, and then he yells at me, and he goes, 你干嘛来跑我? He goes, why are you keep videotaping me? So I say sweetly, oh, no, 为什么你老拍我们? Like, why are you videotaping us? So this kind of was a standoff, and then he went off. And then I see him outside, and he's just, he's like talking to somebody in a very angry way. So then at dinner, the activists and I were having dinner, and we're all talking about this incident. And they said, oh, you know what happened, Tan Lao? Sure, you know what she did? Then they laughed, and they said, we're very insulted. How could they assign such a low-level, incompetent watcher to us, who could not even hold on to his cell phone? And then they said, why did you give back the cell phone? We could have had the full phone records. And I said, well, I could have, but I'm a principled person. I didn't think it was the right thing to do. So I did give it back. But you see, the point is, he knew that we knew. So if anything happened to any one of our people that he was videotaping, I would have put it out onto the internet, onto Youku, onto YouTube, and I would have put it with a big BLT. I would have put a big question like, anybody know who this guy is and where he lives? Like it would be a human search engine search. I have no problems with that. So the last set is that the unions in the context of workers, the unions are the core. That is the core source of protecting rights, and therefore they become the core of organizing and strike, and how do you move to direct elections? And I want to point out that in the human rights area, there are 3 core sectors right now that are absolutely core, and that's the legal profession, the media, and independent civil society organizations, and all 3 now are under a full-scale, intensified attack that includes not only arrests and detentions and threats, and now is both for the media and for lawyers. Just in the last week or 2, regulations are coming down the pipe that is going to restrict what journalists can do and also what lawyers can do. But I think this raises the question of what is the role of the All China Lawyers Association, which is kind of like the All China Trade Association, and I'm looking for those opportunities that Han is talking about, and I'm not sure we see them right now because they're drafting the regulations. So some of these problems are that what are the lawyers doing? What are the journalists doing? Well, they're doing what workers are doing as well, with a fuller range of strategies. Hunger strikes is something that myself, some of us in HRIC will be joining a hunger strike that's supporting some of the lawyers this week, because I'm not a Chinese lawyer. We join it as support hunger strikers, and so we're going to start next week. So the use of social media is very important for that, and the pushing for democracy. So the Beijing Bar Association, the Guangdong Bar Association, the Shenzhen Bar Association, these were critical points of struggle. They tried to get direct elections. They tried to elect their own bar presidents, and they were censored, threatened. Their licenses, their law licenses upon renewal were slowed down. And they were let off, some of them were fired from their law firms. So there's a lot of the similar pressure against organizing, because that, I think, is the key threat. It's organizing. And that is part of how, yes, lawyers are being beat up, but if you, for example, you look on our website, they are coming together. Rather than being afraid, if the lawyers like in Heilongjiang, went on a hunger strike, other lawyers came. The lawyers in Zhengzhou, if you look at their videos, they immediately posted videos. And you see the lawyers, and what are they demanding? The right to see their clients. The courts and the authorities were not letting them even meet with the clients. And then one of the videos on YouTube, which was also posted, you'll see an ordinary guy, an old guy, is coming by on a bicycle. And he's got drinks on the back of his bike. And he gives it to all the lawyers who are sitting there on the floor in front of where they're protesting. And then he gets up and he says, like this to them, "Jiao, jiao." He's like really like applauding them. And then as he bikes away, he says, "Keep going," and then he bikes away. And this was just like an unplanned scene. This is support from ordinary people. And I think that's happening. So I think you're seeing this sense of becoming empowered and not just taking it as we are the victims of these abuses and we are being disappeared and beat up. And it's like saying, what are we going to do about it? And the range of actions, in addition to legal action, which is also a debate in the legal rights community. Should lawyers go on strike? Should lawyers, do civil disobedience? Should lawyers, and this is actually a contested, conversation going on strategically. And so that's just flagging that. The second sort of common point is to raise the question of what is the role of the international community? What is the role of international solidarity support groups or organizations like you? And I think that needs to be completely rethought as well. I think that's a hard conversation, and I think that that's a conversation we haven't even started in the human rights community. And this is really progressive. Like, you can lead the way, having a frank, honest, conversation. What is your role? What should it be? How do you listen to what you hear from Dongfang and local activists or us? Like, how do you hear that? Do you want to rethink that relationship and role? And I think that's a big, hard conversation. The third thing is moving out of just one country, the regional, like some of the capacity training they were doing. That's also something we are trying to push. we were very active in a regional convening in Bangkok a few years ago. And there were like more than 20 Asian NGOs, but beyond Asia, so we also had Central Asia, and we also had Pakistan and Indian NGOs. There was Japanese, Taiwan, Korean. It was quite a range. And we were looking at what are the shared issues we face in the region. And that was just the beginning, and it actually turned out to be a kind of a difficult one. So the last thing I just open up is maybe challenge, Dongfang to give us a little bit more hope about the party, because I think where I see now, and I'm perfectly happy to be thrown off on this and be shown that I'm being, once again, a little too pessimistic of the intellect. I'm always optimistic of the spirit. But of the intellect with respect to the party, I think that there are major structural disincentives for the party to let go of its power. And I think that what we see in the examples that you gave, are examples of actions to the back of the wall, but they're also actions out of self-survival instinct, and that is for the 70 million plus party members. They are now holding the vast lion's share of the benefits and and their interest in that, their total investment as a political and economic elite. Are they going to let go of that lightly? When you look at the mass of hundreds and hundreds of millions of corruption that have been stolen from at every single level, local, provincial, every level in China, and the fact that they are not subject to law. The party is not subject to law. It's the Shuanghui system. So if they do something criminally wrong, they do not come under the regular criminal system. Are they going to give that up and say, yeah, we'll move into, and like everybody else, we'll be subject to law and everything, because the corruption is so rampant? So Xi Jinping can go online and tweet and show him ordering his own dumplings to show how he's really an ordinary guy, because he ordered his own dumplings, it's that I think it's going to take structurally a lot more, and that the rhetoric, which I agree with, is important to read those tea leaves. I think it's very important to read that rhetoric, because you're seeing the ideological rhetoric shifting. But I wouldn't conflate the ideological rhetoric with an actual, A, shift, and B, actual implementation. And then to see who is the audience for that rhetoric and what is the purpose of it. Is it to mollify, to say, no, everybody calm down? Is it really an intent to move there? So I would like to push you a little, Han, and like to hear a little bit more about that, because I know you've thought about that too. So I'll leave it there, because you did ask us to be provocative, and I wasn't that provocative. Okay, thank you.
Says